it's impossible to say, I'm going to do everything right and everything's going to go perfectly, because a tree could still fall on your house. Something could still happen. That happens in life. But you eliminate a lot of the little stuff, a lot of the things along the way that could turn your life upside down, but they're preventable.
Welcome to the Dream Home Podcast, the show where real estate meets real talk. Hosted by John Nagle, a seasoned expert with over $7 billion in real estate financing experience. This podcast features top realtors, builders, and financial pros. Whether you're buying, selling, or investing, we've got the tools to help you make smarter moves. Here's your host, John Nagle.
What if I told you the biggest risk in homeownership isn't your interest rate? It's something most people don't fully verify until it's too late. How the home is built and what your insurance will actually do when disaster hits. Today's guest has spent years investigating what happens when homes meet hurricanes, floods, fires, and extreme weather. And he's here to help buyers and realtors ask smarter questions before they close. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Dream Home Podcast, where real estate meets strategy, and we help buyers, homeowners, and real estate pros make smarter decisions every step of the way. I'm your host, John Nagle with CMG Home Loans. Today, we're digging into a topic that matters in every market and for every homeowner: how to make sure the home you're buying is a sound investment and properly protected before you sign on the dotted line. My guest is George Siegal, a writer, director, and producer who began his career in front of the camera as a weathercaster, newscaster, sportscaster, and feature reporter. George worked in a major U.S. markets, including Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, and Detroit, and later launched the documentary film company Move the World Films. He wrote, directed, and produced the award-winning documentary The Last House Standing, a wake-up call about what happens when disaster strikes and how well homes actually hold up. He also created License to Parent, and he's behind Built to Last, Buyer Beware, a documentary that explores construction quality, accountability, and what buyers can do to protect themselves. George, welcome to the show.
Hey, John, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yes, and you're very welcome. We're excited to have you here. Quick note for the listeners: today is educational. We're not providing legal, engineering, or insurance advice. Always consult licensed professionals for your specific situation. So, George, you've lived in two worlds: broadcast journalism and documentary filmmaking. When it comes to housing risk and resilience, what do you notice that most people don't?
Well, I think, first of all, I don't know if you call it jaded or just experienced, knowing you can't take at face value what people are selling you and assuming that what they're selling you is good. You can't assume this shiny new object is great, I'm going to move into it, and life is going to be fantastic. There are a lot of things people really need to start thinking about. And because it's so difficult to get the building code so high that everybody's safe, if you don't do your homework, I think you're at a real disadvantage. And that's what I'm trying to do, is wake people up so they look at things more closely and make better choices.
Absolutely. And what's one myth you wish buyers and even realtors would stop believing?
You know, it sounds, again, this might sound cynical, but it's trust. It's confidence. I would say trust. It's trusting that the job was done right, so you're not going to have problems. And the reality is construction is not a perfect world. There's things that happen all the time. There's good things and bad things. But you can't assume that everything was done right. And I say this not as an engineer or a builder, because I don't have that technical background, but I've bought a lot of homes. I've covered a lot of stories where there's been damage to homes. I've done home improvement segments, and I know enough to be dangerous about what's wrong with things. And then there's so many videos available online. If you Google any of the major builders that are out there and see some of the neighborhoods they've built and some of the problems that exist, you'll know it's not a perfect science. So there's just you just can't assume that it's going to be perfect, but you can eliminate a lot of problems by doing your due diligence and trying to improve your odds of a better outcome.
And for the real estate pros listening, why does this matter for their clients and their business?
Well, I think it matters a lot, but I have friends that are realtors. I have family that's in the real estate business, and I know there's certain liabilities and legalities and things they're responsible for and not responsible for. But I think realtors are like builders or like anybody in a process. What kind of pride you put into your job is up to you, but I can't sleep at night if I feel like I'm not doing my best for people that I'm working for. So if your customers are more informed, if they understand what they're looking for and are clear to you about what they want, you're able to do a better job on your end. If I tell you I want to live someplace where there's minimal risk of flooding, I want to live someplace where there are no sinkholes, I want to live someplace where there's not a huge fire risk, I've given you something to work with. If I just say, find me a house, I have 2 days to find a place to live, it's your choices. But if I express what I want, then it's my choices, and I've now taken some control. But I still think realtors could do more. Every realtor I've ever worked with that's found me a house, I've learned what I should have asked them to do that they didn't do. I've learned there are things in the process that if I had asked more questions, I would have saved myself a lot of problems. I try not to blame other people for my problems. I try to look at how I could have gotten that information and figured it out myself. And in most cases, you can figure a lot of stuff out.
Yeah, and obviously your reputation is everything in any business. And so for that realtor to take that extra care and caution and inform the buyer, here's what these potential issues might be, that buyer's going to come back and bring back repeat business and refer others because the realtor was diligent enough to consider those issues and let the buyer know about the potential possibility issues.
Absolutely. And, and in all the realtors I've worked with, in a lot of cases, some of them I would never use again because of things I feel they could have done to make it easier for me. But I could say that about builders. I could say that about products that I buy. I mean, everything you do is an experience, and how that experience goes for you determines how you're going to act in the future. But I think realtors could really be a huge asset in this entire process. And the real estate sites are starting to do that now. They're putting in risks, flood risks, and different ratings that are scores on there. And I hope that gets a lot more detailed. So you know the risk rating of buying a house in a neighborhood. You know what the flood possibilities are. The more information buyers can have, the better decisions we can make.
Actually, that's a great point because we do spend time with these FEMA maps. In the old days, you literally had this manual piece of paper. You had to figure out where you were at on that FEMA map. And now it's much more obtainable information. And I think that's a great thing that it is getting published more. So it's people can find out exactly what the situation is from a floodplain issue.
Absolutely. And you can also, every community has a floodplain manager, and you can call down to that office. And I've got to tell you, out of all the people that I've met in making my last two films, I didn't even know what a floodplain manager was until my first film. And now I know these people passionately care about what they do. They love it when people reach out to them, and they have a ton of information. So you could reach out to your local floodplain manager and get a lot of good information about different areas to possibly live. And that can be very valuable for you. So take advantage of these people. They want to help you.
Absolutely. So let's make this practical. Buying a home, especially the first time, can feel overwhelming. When someone is nervous, what's your calm, simple way to help them feel in control?
I would say don't focus on the icing on the cake. Focus on the ingredients. Don't get wooed by the granite countertops. Don't get wooed by the beautiful hardwood floor they might have put in, or the travertine in the bathroom, or things that kind of take your eye off the prize there. Try to look at other things. Knock on doors and see if they're solid doors. Knock on walls and see how strong those feel. Open and close things. If you're looking at a house, send your kids upstairs and have them run around while you're downstairs and see if there's any insulation between the first and second floor, and what kind of quality might have been put into that house. Where if you and your wife are talking downstairs, your kids aren't listening in the farthest back bedroom because the house is not that well built. Open and close windows. Look at floors and see if that wood floorboard gets more narrow as it goes down the wall. And then the room's probably not square because they didn't cut. They didn't. Where did they catch up and fix that? Look at tiles on a backsplash behind the stove and see if they're even on both sides. I mean, there's so many little things you can look for that a home inspector is not going to look for. There are different quality checks that I like to think just by how doors open and close, and look for cracks in corners and settling. All houses settle. But one of the things I've learned recently is because lots are scraped so much before builders build the house there, that quite often it's not settled properly. So when the foundation is poured, there's going to be cracking, there's going to be settling. And a lot of foundations have a lot of problems because they pour them and do it too quickly before the ground is ready. So I think it's to your advantage to spend some time in that house and really look at it. And also, the list we're making available to your listeners today about questions you should ask the builder or the seller of the house you're buying. Ask them about the safety features that they put in that house that would withstand the disasters that could happen in that area. So if you're in an area that gets high wind, how did they build that house to withstand that? What level did they build to? One of my least favorite terms, and I talk about this in almost everything I do, is when a builder looks at you and says, this is built to code. Because that's basically saying, here's the code of what they're saying. I built this house to the minimum standard I could get away with without having to do anything more. And I think that's a very telling thing, because I know builders that will say, I'm looking ahead 5 or 10 years, 20 years. I'm thinking about what could happen here. I don't want this house. I'm not a rebuilder. I'm a builder, and I want this house to last. So that's a very important thing to find out.
Yeah, that's so true. So in your work, what are the most common pain points people run into after disaster, things they never expected?
Well, probably the first one, well, there's two. One is they never thought the disaster would hit them. And most victims say that, wow, I never thought this would happen to me. And that's very, very common. The other is they go to file their insurance claim, and it's not quite the way it looks on the TV commercials. Flow may look great in a commercial. You're in good hands, all the different sayings that there are. And they sound good, and they're great sales tools. But how do they really deliver when push comes to shove? You have to figure, if just your house burns down and they're coming to take care of that, you can get some attention. You can probably get good help. But if every house in the neighborhood is destroyed, now there's a strain on the resources. So that insurance company now has a lot more on their plate. I think on a good day, they try to figure out ways not to pay claims. But on a bad day, they really do. So you have to take that into account and think, what can I do to understand my insurance policy and know what coverage I have? You need to understand that if you live in an area where any flooding can happen, if you don't have flood insurance, you're not getting paid. Insurance companies exclude flooding in almost every case. I don't know of any that don't. So you need to have flood insurance. The problem they have where I live in Florida is when there's a flood and there's wind and your house gets damaged, those two entities will say, no, it was a flood. No, it was the water. It was the wind. So wind and water try to blame it on each other, and good luck getting a claim anytime soon with that. And people also need to understand, you're not getting back on your feet right away in most cases. In the neighborhood that I live in, it's 2 years since Hurricanes Milton and Helene, and there are houses that are still being fixed. There's people still living in trailers in their front yard. There are houses that are being torn down every day, and bigger, safer houses, allegedly, are being put in. So it's a very long road to recovery. So you can't assume, I'm going to file a claim, I'll be back on my feet in no time, because in all likelihood, you will not be.
Absolutely. So if a realtor wants to level up their buyer consult, what's a simple way they can introduce smart protection without making the buyer feel anxious?
Just be honest with them. I think you need to be straight with them. If you're showing houses in a floodplain, I would tell them this is in a floodplain. I know you can't, and realtors have to be careful because everybody can get sued in so many ways. And I understand there's a real risk there. And also that you're in this to make a living and you want to sell houses. But I think by letting buyers know the risks, if you know a neighborhood that has a history of flooding, why are you even showing houses in that neighborhood without telling people that? I don't know how you could get sued for saying, yeah, there's a risk of flooding here. You want to make sure you have really good insurance. Because maybe some people don't care. I think a lot of people don't care. There's people that are fixing their one-story house that flooded from a hurricane that was not even a bullseye for us, but it had 4 feet of water inside, and all they're doing is fixing the damage. That's not real smart to think that you're fixing a problem. So if I'm a realtor and I could give people peace of mind, it would be being straight with them, telling them the realities. Hey, there's a very high fire risk here, and there's only one road out. I just think that you could sleep better at night by letting them know these things, and don't sit there keeping your head down going, well, maybe they won't notice that there's that huge crack in the back there. I know it's not your job to point everything out, but I think these realtors have a lot more knowledge. I'll give you a great example. When we bought our house here, it was a tree-lined street, and that's one of the things we were looking for, was a tree-lined street in Florida. When we moved here, after we bought the house and then moved down here several months later, every tree had been cut down that was on the road. It was no longer a tree-lined street. There was a huge sewer project they were doing. Now, I know our realtor had to know about that. I know everybody probably knew about it that lived here. Now, I could blame them. All I had to do was call the city and say, hey, I'm buying a house on this beautiful tree-lined street. Are there any projects coming up? Anything going on here that I should know about? And then I would have had the answer. So I think that it's great if they can help, but as the buyer, don't count on that 100%. Do your part on your end.
I think that that's great advice, and you mentioned earlier on that you're looking at the tile and the flooring and the marble and so on. And a buyer doesn't know to go look and say, hey, that crack above that doorway might mean a foundation issue and those sorts of things. So you're absolutely right. That's what the realtor's role needs to be, because they have seen that and they do understand maybe there's foundation issues in a certain area, right? And so on. So
yeah, and they know what the soil is like there. If you're living on a hard packed soil, that when it gets dry during the summer, that means that the house could shift and crack. They know if there's places where, when I bought a house years ago in Detroit, Michigan, and all the houses there had sump pumps in the basement. I didn't know what a sump pump was. I just figured they're just keeping water flowing around the house. And the power went out one night, and the next thing we know, we had 4 feet of water in our basement. Nobody told me that would happen if the power went out. I had no idea. Now, once again, it's easy to get mad and blame. How come nobody told me? How come I didn't ask the question? How come I didn't say, explain what this sump pump is for and what are the risks of my basement flooding? Tell me why I don't want to keep all my valuables in the basement where it can flood. You can blame people for your mistakes, or you can say, how do I get the information so it's on me? And that's the theme in almost everything I talk about. Is I believe it's all on us. If anybody helps you, it's a bonus, but don't let that be the cornerstone of what you're doing. Going, yeah, everybody's going to tell me, the builder's going to be honest with me. I know he hired good subs. Everything's great. Baloney. I want to ask the builder, who are the subs that you used when you were building this house? Is it a plumber that you regularly use, or did you sub out this whole project to the lowest bidder? One thing I read about the big change that's happening in the construction world, these guys are all getting paid by the job and not by the hour.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a pretty scary proposition, because what happens if you're getting paid by the job? You want to go on to the next job as quickly as possible, or you're not making money. You want to make more money. So it takes away that quality control of pointing at that house. So the more questions you ask, it all comes back to you, the better off you are.
Absolutely. I love this part of the show. You film real people in real situations. What's a moment from built to last, buyer beware, a scene, an interview, a place that changed how you think about housing forever?
Well, there was a gentleman we were talking to in Fort Myers Beach. We were sitting in his house that had been almost completely wiped out. And he was talking about he's living in a house. He can't live in his house, but he's paying the mortgage on that house. He has to live someplace else most of the time. He couldn't live with his wife because the wife was with the kid closer to school. And he didn't have contents insurance for all the stuff that was spread out all around us. I am haunted by that image, because this guy had the perfect Florida life. He had jet skis. He had a couple of boats. He lived on a canal. He had a pool in his backyard. They had the perfect Florida life, and it all went away, and it'll be almost impossible for him to ever get that back. And that has stuck with me and haunts me anytime I think of it. Because he could have gotten more insurance. He should have had more insurance. He should have understood the risk, but it's still heartbreaking when you see people lose stuff, because you have everything and then you have nothing.
Oh, absolutely. That's a horrific story for sure. So what did you learn about what actually helps homes survive without getting overly technical?
Well, I think, first of all, avoiding water is a huge thing. And we saw on Sanibel Island, it's an island completely surrounded by water. And they had 10, 12, 14 feet of water in different places on that island. And most things were built at ground level. We used to go there every year and stay at this condo that was on the beach facing south. And you could walk out, and 20 steps, you're on the beach in the sand. And it was the ground floor. And I used to say to my wife, God, this place is gone if there's a hurricane down here. It's gone. And so were most of the places there. So, when you see damage like that, water is one thing you want to avoid at all costs. And the other is that knowledge of knowing how you would be protected and what your road to recovery is like. People also need to be concerned when you live in fire areas. We've seen so many stories. I grew up in Pacific Palisades, which burned to the ground last year. And that's unbelievable what happened there. When I was growing up there, we never would have thought fire could have burned in the town of the Palisades. So I tell people, how ready are you? How much are you even prepared for a fire? Most people have those flimsy little ladders that all bunch up in a box and they stick it upstairs in their house. They've never hooked it onto a window and thrown it outside and climbed out on it. So they don't even know if that would work. They don't know how defensible the spaces are around their house, how fireproof things are. So the point is, any knowledge you have in any of those areas is good. But the thing that seems to cause the most problems, especially where I live, is water. And if you look at stories around the country, it's usually flash flooding, a dam breaking, some type of water intrusion, sewers backing up. When water gets in your house, it's a game changer because walls are like sponges. Water wicks up into the walls. The electricity is damaged. The carpet's damaged. The floor is damaged. The cabinets are damaged. And a lot of people don't have flood insurance, so they're getting no money for it.
Yeah, appliances too. It's just devastating anytime you have water, and it's just impossible to stop once it starts coming in.
Yeah, we saw that with Hurricane Helene. The water was 4 feet away from my front door. And our house is at about 10 and a half feet, I believe. So when you see the water rising in your yard, there's not a more helpless feeling that I've ever had as a homeowner because I know I can't stop it. If it's windy, I assume I can be okay because we have a concrete block house. I'm hoping trees don't land on the house. But when that water's rising, there's nothing you can do if you're not prepared for it. And that is a scary feeling, and it's a feeling I did not enjoy experiencing.
Absolutely. And you've continued this mission through Built to Last, Buyer Beware. In plain language, what's the big idea behind that film?
The concept or the idea, the thought process, and you see it in the beginning of the film, is that when we buy a house, we're taking all our chips, a big pile of money. Sometimes that's all we have. We're putting it on a table, sliding it in, we're all in, and then we spin the wheel. And on the wheel we show in the film, it lists all the things that can go wrong as a homeowner. Fire, mold, wind, tornadoes, lists them all. And there's one little tab on there that says happily ever after. That's your goal, is to have that happen. Yet you've bet everything on spinning that wheel. And that, to me, that's a huge risk that we always take, because the happily ever after only comes if none of those other things happen. So the goal of the film is, okay, let's eliminate a lot of these things. Let's improve our chances so happily ever after is a lot more likely. And it's impossible to say, I'm going to do everything right and everything's going to go perfectly, because a tree could still fall on your house. Something could still happen. That happens in life. But you eliminate a lot of the little stuff, a lot of the things along the way that could turn your life upside down, but they're preventable.
All right, this is the take notes portion. Let's give listeners a practical checklist they can use on a showing, during inspections, and while they're getting insurance lined up.
Well, when you set that inspector loose on the house, they're looking for certain things. They're not necessarily looking at the things you're looking for, and there's things you might want them to look for. It's like, how many of them go up into the crawl space and make sure that those ceiling fans in the bathrooms are actually vented outside through the roof and not just into that crawl space? How many of them do go up on the roof to see how things are done, or do they put a drone up there to see how things are done? There's things that are hard to find, like whether the flashing was done right. It would be nice to have that checked. I think something everybody should do is ask the seller or the builder to show you the engineering report for the air conditioning and the heating that they put in that house. Because I don't think I've ever bought a house where they got that right. They always try to save money, so they put in smaller air conditioners than are needed, smaller ducts than will carry air, and they really kind of half-ass what might be one of the most important comfort things in your house. Where are the return airs in the house? Is there enough to pull the air out so it can come back in cooled? How many air conditioning units did they put in? If you don't ask those questions, they're not going to tell you. The inspector's just going to turn it on and go, yep, the splits in all the rooms were fine, but he might not be there on a 100-degree day in the middle of summer. He might not be there in the dead of winter when it's 20 below zero and you're freezing your tail off. And here's why that matters. If the system wasn't done right, those air conditioners aren't going to last as long as they should. They should last 10 or 15 years, 15 years maybe. they could burn out in 5. They're now running all the time. They're now forced to do something that they weren't built to do. So that's a huge thing that can be done. And then there's the stuff we talked about earlier, just the quality things you can walk around and see, the cabinets with the appliances. Did they put what are the appliances? What are the age of the appliances? It'd be nice if somebody actually pulled the dishwasher out, because those things unscrew, and see if everything's bracketed and mounted properly in there. Is there any leaking that's going on? Is there any drainage in the laundry room in case my washing machine backs up? What's the flood damage going to be from that? Where is the house properly amped for electricity? If I turn a hairdryer on in my daughter's bathroom upstairs, is the whole system going to go out in that room? I don't think inspectors can check all that stuff. And my other thing is, don't be afraid of spending a little money to check it, because it's a heck of a lot less than finding it out after you own that house. So if I spend $1,000 on inspections, and I know that's a lot of money for a lot of people, and I'm not downplaying that, but you could be walking away from a house that would have cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you have to look at it as money well spent. It's like when you have homeowners insurance and nothing happens for a few years. People go, I don't even need that. And I live in a safe spot. Then you cancel it, and then disaster hits. It's like, you can't think that way. You have to, it's almost you're a detective going through that house, and you want to find the problems. And the inspector is going to do his thing, but there's things you can do on top of that, and give them a list of things that matter to you when you're inspecting it. Don't take an inspector that the builder recommends. Don't take an inspector that your realtor recommends. Find one that your neighbors recommend. The other thing I tell people, walk around the neighborhood. Don't go by the referrals that are given by people. Find out on your own. How do you do that on a Saturday? Walk around your neighborhood and find houses that look like yours. Go knock on the door and say, hey, is this house built by so-and-so? Yeah. What's your experience been like? Does he come out and fix things when there's problems? Are things breaking in your house? How long have you owned it? What's it been like? Because the friends and family referral list to me is garbage. I'm reading Amazon reviews, I look at the 1 and 2 star reviews, maybe the 3, because I want to know if the company actually responded to them. Did they say, yeah, oh, we're so sorry that you had that water intrusion. We're coming out to fix it because it shouldn't have happened. Or did they just ignore it and let them pile up? And there's a list of complaints that people have had. So I think you can learn a lot from talking to people in the neighborhood. You don't always have that luxury. Some people are on a relocation. They have 2 days to find a house. They're in, they're out. That's really not to your advantage to do that. I would walk around the neighborhood on a weekend and talk to as many people as possible.
A great suggestion. So when a buyer is standing in a home during a tour, what are the biggest categories of things they should notice or ask about beyond the finishes?
There's things that I look for. Like I said, if you have kids, send them upstairs while you're downstairs. You can learn a lot about a house by hearing them go thumping up the stairs, running around upstairs. You can tell whether that crew, when they were screwing the floorboards into the studs upstairs, whether they just rapid fired it and didn't hit any of them. And now you hear squeaking and bouncing and noise every time somebody's moving around. And then look in the corners, look in the windows. Are they square? If there's arches, this is one of the things that drives me nuts. And I'm one of those people that if I walk into your house and a painting's crooked, I have to go straighten it. So when I see arches in a house, usually one side is lopsided like this, one side is off. I couldn't buy that. I had a house where they had all the arches crooked, and I had to have them all redone because it drove me nuts.
Holy cow.
That tells you their workmanship, the quality, that they can't even square an arch. Is the door set properly? Do the windows all function? I mean, there's things you can find out that'll give you a good indication of the sturdiness of the house. Open and close the garage door. Is it creaking and groaning? Did they put in the right size motor on the garage door? There's a lot of things that can give you details on quality. Hollow doors drive me nuts because they're cheap, and to me, it's garbage. And then cabinets and drawers. How do they open and close? An inspector might tell you that the sink drains properly, but is he checking all the cabinets? I don't know. I don't know if he or she checks those things. You got to ask them if that's part of what they do. So there's things you can tell. Don't get wooed by the beautiful countertops, and don't get wooed by the things they put in there, the beautiful fixture in the dining room that makes you ignore the fact that it provides no light for that room. You flip on the other lights. Do they hit properly? Did they square them up properly? So those, if there's recessed lighting in there, I hate it when they're off balance and they didn't do that right. It's like, what was the thought process? And here's one that really drives me nuts. when they put light bulbs in a place that you will never be able to change. Now, we have 3 lights above our house outside. I can't find anybody that will go up there with a cherry picker and change those light bulbs. They put smoke alarms in stairwells where you would need an acrobat swinging on a rope to get up there, or somebody with a 40-foot ladder.
Yeah.
Walking around with a 40-foot ladder. So now changing that $6 light bulb is going to cost you $106 because you got to pay the guy to come out with a ladder. So those are things that tell me they weren't thinking. Where did they put the thermostat upstairs? Did they put it in a room? Is it in an open area where it's going to work properly? I mean, there's a million things, but what I'm saying is you'll learn a lot by looking at those things. And if it's clear, is there a dead space where they were building a hallway to nowhere? And it just is nothing you'll ever be able to use in that house because they just ran out of space. You know, there's so many things that go, wow, the Three Stooges built this place. Then go buy something else. Don't reward mediocrity.
Absolutely. And during inspections, what do you want buyers and agents focusing on so they don't miss the stuff that becomes expensive later?
Well, you know, as we talked about, I think two of the biggest areas that can get you are air conditioning and plumbing and roofing, how they did the roof. You know, I've had houses where they didn't do the flashing properly. I had one house where they ran out of waterproof barrier and they just put paper. I've seen where the exhaust fan just goes into the attic but doesn't go outside. There was a stove that it went into not in houses that I've owned, but houses that when I did a handyman segment, where the stove vent didn't even go up to the attic and go out properly, or they didn't do caulking around it so water was dripping in and getting inside the house. There are so many things that are little, they seem like little things, but they're things that you really need to pay attention to. And you can pick up a lot of. We bought one house on a golf course because the salesman told us golf balls never come in that yard. Wow. Well, we're the dumbest people. That guy must have been laughing when we left because all we did was get hit by golf balls. I had to put up a 40-foot high fence to try to slow them down. And then they were bouncing off our house all the time. You almost had to wear a helmet to be in the backyard. So we used to take the golf balls and go over to the model house. It wasn't on the golf course. We throw them all in the backyard. When people were looking at the model home, they would go, "Have these golf balls?"
Yeah.
But it's simple things like that. If you're buying a house on a golf course, sit out there on an afternoon and see if you're going to have golf balls firing into your yard all the time. Nobody's going to tell you that if you don't figure it out for yourself.
Absolutely. You know, and this is why we tell buyers, use your inspection period wisely. Knowledge gives you options, and you investigate all those things. That's a great idea to put those golf balls in the model home because then they know to ask that question. What about golf balls in my yard?
Yeah. And what an ass that guy was to have lied to us. But you know what? Again, all we had to do was put in the time to check for ourselves. We didn't have to take somebody at their word for something like that. But I think when you're looking at a house, think of the things, and you really can't check after you've moved in. But if this goes to how good a plumber they had putting them in, are the toilets sealed properly upstairs? Because if they're not, they're going to leak downstairs and they're going to cause water damage in your house. Try to go after it rains if possible. There are houses in my neighborhood that for 2 or 3 days after a rain, it's like a lake in front of their house in the street. Now, in a hot, humid neighborhood that has mosquitoes, that has all kinds of things that are disgusting, and that water is just sitting outside your house, you won't know that on a sunny day. Nobody's going to volunteer that. It's not going to be in the description. Oh, by the way, the street turns into a lake every day after it rains. You're going to have to find that out for yourself.
So, okay, George, let's talk about insurance. Buyers here, you need homeowners insurance to close and assume that means they're protected. But your work shows that's not always that simple.
Yeah, I would have an insurance broker lined up. Maybe they come out after you've made your offer and somebody looks at it and tells you, yeah, I can get this covered and get proof that that house can be covered for insurance. And I know you can't close until that point, but if you're not able to get insurance, I don't know how quickly they're going to give you your down payment back if that screws up the sales process. Now I'm in your neck of the woods where you probably know a lot more than I do about how those things can mess up. But I think you need to know if it's insurable, how much it will cost you to insure it, and understand the risk you're taking. In Florida, there's a 2% hurricane deductible. So that means if you have a $500,000 house, the first $10,000 of any damage in a hurricane is based on the value of that house. Good luck getting a claim in that instance, because what if you only have 5,000 or 6,000? In Hurricane Helene here, our pool motor flooded. It was $3,000. Well, I have the deductible that's much higher than that. I couldn't claim that, so I'm out $3,000. And that's another thing I just thought of. If you live in an area that floods, look where they put the pool equipment, because most of those dummies put it directly on the ground, and that's the first thing that floods and gets ruined. And those are $2,500 to $3,000 just to replace the motor for your pool. But I would have an insurance agent come out and tell you what it's going to cost. Make sure you can get flood insurance for that property. Know what that's going to cost. If it's an older home and it doesn't meet the requirements that are needed for flood insurance could be pretty costly. So that might not be a house you want to buy if it's going to cost you $5,000 a year for flood insurance when it costs everybody else $1,000 if they're built to the right height. And I think you take a real risk not getting those answers beforehand. And then find out what the rating is of that insurance company and what the likelihood is, their history of claims. All of them have bad experiences that they have. That doesn't mean they're not going to do a good job for you. You don't know the circumstances that went wrong in the other deals. But I've never found one that everybody loves, because the people that love it don't usually write reviews and complain. It's the people that had a bad experience. So It's not completely fair to judge. You want to make sure they have the reserves to pay off your claim, and that they're not in the news for sending out adjusters and then switching adjusters and dragging it out and very litigious for years to get you taken care of. Find a company that's easy to work with and that seems to care.
So when you look at what goes wrong after major storms or disasters, what are the big misunderstandings people have about homeowners insurance?
That they're going to swoop in and save you. You know, it's like their biggest. I think their biggest misunderstanding is they think it's automatically going to get them whole. And when you factor in that 2% deductible, if you factor in that if you have a problem with the insurance company and you have to get a lawyer, in a lot of states you don't get attorney's fees. You don't get it in Florida anymore if you have to sue your insurance company. And a lot of times you want to hire a private, a public insurance adjuster, so you can get somebody that comes out and they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So maybe they'll put in a list of damage that they'll work with the insurance company and get that taken care of for you. And then they get a certain percentage for doing that. The Florida Association of Public Insurance Adjusters is a sponsor of our PBS program, where the film Built to Last Buyer Beware is showing. And those guys do really good work. They can be very important in the process of helping people, because insurance companies, and you see stories on the news all the time, and you could Google this and see an endless amount of them, of where they deny claims. There's books that have been written about them. Their goal is to deny claims and not pay it, because they know they'll outlast you. They know they'll outlive you, and they know they can outspend you. So if they're not doing their job because they care and have integrity, they're the big Goliath bully, and you're the little guy that has almost no chance. So you want to give yourself the best chance as possible. And what I say to people is, the best insurance is having a house that's well built, so you don't need to use the insurance. Because once you do, it's not a slam dunk that it's going to work. I'll give you one more example that I think everybody should be aware of. And that's if we just switched homeowners insurance company, and we had one that we had all lined up, and the broker comes back to me and goes, they won't insure you. And I go, why? And he goes, because you've made 2 claims before. And I go, but they were tiny little claims. And he goes, yeah, you would have been better off saying your whole house was destroyed by a disaster, and they would rate you differently than if you filed a claim for a broken window, or you filed a claim for a little water leak that you had. Because when you do that, the insurance company brands you as someone who's likely to file claims, and they think of you as a problem. So over the years, I've probably spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on insurance. I've probably claimed $5,000, and they punished me for that. I'm now considered a risk. That's insane if you think about that. That's not what you think you're getting in that transaction. And to me, that's one of the most clear examples of how unbalanced the situation is, that you pay, but when you get back a little, they brand you as someone who's a taker and will file claims. And that's total baloney, in my opinion. So be very careful about that.
That's a good point. And George, if a buyer listening remembers just one thing from today, what do you want it to be?
I hate to say it because it sounds harsh, but you're on your own. You know, you're the last line of defense. You're the one who can avoid the bad decision. Nobody's making you move into that house. Nobody's making you buy that house. Nobody's making you move into that condo or apartment. It's on you. So if you make a mistake, ultimately you only have yourself to blame if you don't do the work. So I would tell people, look at it, pretend this is a problem I have to be in control of. That doesn't mean, I could eat healthy and still have something go wrong with me, but I have a better chance of being okay if I'm eating healthy. Same with driving, same with anything we do. You're improving your chances of a good outcome. And with real estate, because I have so little faith in the people that build the structures and the people that insure the structures, I want to make sure that I get the best structure and the best insurance. And then I want to make sure that I don't need them, that they're there, and God forbid I need them. I hope they come through for me, but it's not a guarantee.
Well, George, thank you. This is one of those conversations that could genuinely save people money and stress and heartbreak. We will be adding links in the show notes, how to connect with George, and a link to download a free copy of What to Ask the Realtor, the Builder, the Seller, and a link to rent the Built to Last Buyer Beware movie. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the Dream Home Podcast and share it with a friend who's house hunting or working with house hunters. And if you're buying a home or you're an agent who wants a smoother closing process, my team and I at CMG Home Loans are here to help you plan the financing side and think through the right questions before you commit. George, thanks again for being here. We really appreciate you taking time to join us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to the Dream Home Podcast, hosted by John Nagle. Ready to take the next step toward your dream home? Visit www.dreamhomepodcast.com for resources, tips, and expert advice. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe, leave a review, and join us next time for more real estate insights and mortgage tips. Until then, happy home hunting.